And Brendan O'Neill on the way, but it's Megyn Kelly time now. The top US. The Megyn Kelly Show podcast is with me, and breaking tonight, chaos has erupted in NATO's attempt to present a united front against Vladimir Putin after President Biden suddenly dismissed a Polish plan to supply desperately needed warplanes to Ukraine. So does this show that the US is losing control of the crisis? Well, it's hard not to conclude that the American commander-in-chief's grip on reality is slipping. This was President Biden yesterday while speaking in support of veterans.
3 congressmen you have here, 2 of them look like they really could and did play ball, and the other one looks like he could bomb you.
At a time of war, could there have been a worse choice of words? Then at the end of the speech, Sleepy Joe looked, well, literally lost. Good Lord, Megyn, how does this man coordinate the free world's response to the biggest invasion since World War II?
These videos have we looked at together, and have we seen him wandering aimlessly, meandering, while his handlers in a panic try to figure out where to direct him? It's embarrassing. I mean, I recognize that we all get more frail when we're old, but that's one of the reasons most of us don't try to become the leader of the free world and get our finger on the nuclear button, especially, and we see why now, right? Especially in times like this, when the nuclear button may become potentially relevant. There's no strong confidence in Joe Biden over here. His poll numbers went up slightly this week, as they always tend to for an American president when we find ourselves possibly engaged in a battle or facing down potential evil. But they're going to fall again, because while Joe Biden has rallied sort of the left and the media into thinking he's in command here and he knows what he's doing, the pain is about to hit. The pain's about to hit Americans, and it's going to hit, to be honest, our friends in Russia. Forget Putin. I'm talking about Russian citizens about whom we care and with whom we have no beef. I mean, I've spent a fair amount of time over there the past couple of years. The Russian people, they have nothing against the West. They like Putin because he's been their strong man and he stood up for Mother Russia and he sort of fought for the country, which was meandering and kind of looked like Biden for a while there, aimlessly wandering without much direction. And then in came Putin to save it. Putin is a strategic guy. Putin wants to protect Russia. He does absolutely want to expand into part of Ukraine. Somebody asked me if he's evil. His behavior certainly is. I can't psychoanalyze the man, but I think his behavior is all driving toward a strategic aim that he thinks is going to be good for Mother Russia. But my point is that our beef is not really with the Russians, and they're about to be subjected to a world of hurt over there, and so are you guys, and so is Germany, so is Europe, and so are we, thanks to what is now the worst global energy crisis we've seen in 50 years, which he should have saw coming, and in particular Angela Merkel should have saw coming.
Yeah.
Germany, which was leading Europe to become dependent on Russia, too many countries within Europe, should have seen it coming, and none of us will get any apologies, as the regular working class citizens soon have to pay the equivalent of $6 or $7 a gallon of gas.
And not that we're going to hear this in the mainstream media, of course, but Donald Trump did warn of this, and he warned Germany of it. But anyway, Megyn, I wanted to ask you about...
The Germans laughed at him.
Yeah,
he stood
literally.
And said,
literally
Germany
laughed.
is too dependent on Russia for its energy. The Germans laughed at him, and Angela Merkel gave him the only adult in the room, remember that, gave him we know how to run our country.
Yeah. Megyn, I did want to ask you about Putin, though, because I know you have met him, you have interviewed him. I know you can't psychoanalyze him, but I think once you've sat down with someone face to face, you do get a little bit of an idea of their character.
Well, I mean, I interviewed him 3 times in the past few years. And look, Putin, he's in control of what you think of him, or so he believes. If he wants to charm you, he will charm you. If he wants to threaten you, he will threaten you. He's nothing but more than a manipulator in his interpersonal relationships. He's a KGB guy. He was in the KGB for most of his formative years. He, as you've heard by now, views the collapse of the Soviet Union as the biggest catastrophe of the 20th century. And I think when you're sitting across from the guy, I'll give you a couple of examples. He knew that I was the mother of 3 young children, so he was quick to compliment his own mother and talk about his relationship with his mom and how important she was to him. Now, when does Vladimir Putin engage in such talk with any American journalist or journalist at all? Right? He was trying to disarm me, to soften me toward him in advance of the interview. Then when I was interviewing him and it was contentious, he mentioned my 3 children. He mentioned my children as an aside, which was, you could argue a veiled threat. This is a man who's had journalists killed, who is poisoning recently dissidents in his country and his chief opposition, Navalny, among others. So, was it an accident that he mentioned my children in a contentious interview? Probably not. And then when I sat with him and with Prime Minister Modi of India, and we were at the presidential palace in St. Petersburg for quite some time together, the 3 of us having tea and enjoying one another's company. And in that setting, he kept complimenting my appearance, and it wasn't a come on. It was an attempt to diminish, right? It was an attempt to sort of, piss on the fire pole, if you'll forgive me. It's like, it's I'm more powerful than you. I'm going to put you in your place, and you're going to understand that I'm the one in command. And finally, when we got on stage another time and had a very contentious exchange about Syria, he got right in my face, Dan. He got angry. There was literally like spit coming out of his mouth. Very defensive about what Russia did in Syria, what they didn't do, and how dare you. And there was the moment where I was like, am I going to leave Russia like upward vertically, or am I going to leave like in a bag? Because it's happened. So he is ruthless. He is ruthless, and he will stop at nothing to get what he wants. And every interpersonal relationship is part of his cunning nature, his will to make you see him as he wishes.
Absolutely fascinating, Megan. Love that insight. Just before you go, I wanted to play you this clip of Joe Biden, so he was then a senator, of course, back in 1997, because I saw it earlier in the week, and it was fascinating because it did show me that Biden at one time at least knew that NATO expansion could cause this reaction from Putin. Have a look, Megan. I'll get you to react off the bat.
One place where the greatest consternation would be caused in the short term for admission, having nothing to do with the merit and preparedness of the country to come in, would be to admit the Baltic states now in terms of NATO-Russian, U.S.-Russian relations. And if there was ever anything that was going to tip the balance, were it to be tipped in terms of a vigorous and hostile reaction, I don't mean military, in Russia, it would be that.
Megan, maybe that Joe Biden would be a competent president.
Well, what's interesting, Dan, is here his defenders will try to defend his verbal missteps, his meandering speech and behavior as, look, he has a stutter. They'll try to say he has a stutter. They'll try to attribute all of his missteps to that. And look at that clip. There's no stutter. He's handling it fine. There's deterioration. He's obviously starting to lose it, and no one will acknowledge this. And not only will they not acknowledge it, they're promising that he's going to run for a second term. Dan, last I checked, you don't get younger as the years go by. You get older, and things start to go downhill for everyone, including him. And he hasn't led the most robust, athletic life, or done the things that would make sure that you were at peak health when you're at this age. And you can see it. And part of the panic is, God forbid something happens to Joe Biden, look who we have behind him. This woman, Kamala Harris, right now, in the midst of this energy crisis we discussed, is touting electric cars and buses. So is he, by the way. Our country, our leaders are still lecturing us on how renewables are the answer. Meanwhile, just give you one example. Look at France and look at Germany. France went nuclear. They're almost entirely nuclear for their energy. Germany tried to do the glorious solar panels and windmills, literally tilting at windmills. And Germany's carbon emissions are still higher than France's, and France's energy costs are almost 50% lower than Germany. We will not learn. What we need is a change in leadership.
No, and here's what happens when you let a silly little Swedish teenager dictate your environment policy. Megyn Kelly.
That's exactly
Fascinating analysis as ever. And of course, Megyn hosts the Megyn Kelly Show, available on Sirius XM in the US, as well as on YouTube and as a podcast for international listeners. Now, coming up, as Russian composer Tchaikovsky's music is removed from a Cardiff concert because of the war in Ukraine, is it unjust to blame anyone with Russian origins for the Kremlin's crimes? Well, Brendan O'Neill is tonight's outsider, and he'll tackle what he calls the anti-Russian hysteria sweeping the West. But next, was Nicola Sturgeon's apology to witches burned at the stake 400 years ago a long time coming, or total woke nonsense? Broadcaster Christine Hamilton, Kent-based witch coven leader Charlotte Clark, and witchcraft teacher Eliza Mary Gray debate that in The Clash next.